Hello and welcome everyone to the main event, our first of 2024. I'm Meeta Sani and I'm really pleased to be joined today by our special guest, Joyce Materego-Woodall. Hello, Joyce.
Hello, Meeta. Lovely to be here.
Really good to have you, Joyce. This is long time in the making, isn't it? Getting you in to guest with us. I'm so pleased it's the beginning of the year because this is such an important topic. We're talking about creating a diverse talent attraction strategy for organizations to really hit the ground running with making sure that their strategies and their people are both retained and attracted through the diversity lens, right? Because there's so many benefits of that, right? Tell me, like, from your experience, what would you say are the main benefits of having a diverse workforce?
Yeah. You know, me being someone who is trained as an accountant, I would always go to it makes business sense to have, a diverse workforce in terms of people who are delivering at the front line or leadership, because you make more holistic business decisions if you have more people from different backgrounds and different life experiences. I think also it's just good in terms of developing us as human beings. If you have different perspectives, you're able to live your life in a way that is more is full. You contribute more of your gift to the world in that way. I think those are the two things that come off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. We've got the holistic approach, and then we've got the facts, which are that profitability increases with diverse workforces. As you said, morally, it's absolutely the right thing to do. But also innovation. Like, if you look at the correlation between diversity and innovation, the most innovative organizations happen to be the most diverse. So any leader who's watching this, whether it's live now or a recording afterwards, you can't afford to miss any of the tools that you can take away from this. So just while everyone's settling in, I always jump into the topic, but I'm going to do a quick bit of housework. So welcome, everyone. If you're long-seasoned main event attendees, welcome back. If you're new to the main world, welcome. And we hope that you find the next 40 to 45 minutes really useful. We always make our sessions as short, but innovative and useful. We want you to take away tools that you can apply straight away. But we also promise that if you have any questions, we will answer them. So we have a chat box here, which I'm going to show everyone how it works. The more interactive our sessions, the more we can give you solutions and create conversation that suits the audience in the room today. So I've just said a quick hello there. That's as easy as it is. So let us know you're out there. Let us know what you're thinking, and let's make this a good session. The only other thing I wanted to say is that we have a poll running, as we always do, to get a feel for what wins and challenges there are in the room at the moment. So if you haven't voted yet, please do. We will share the results of that poll at the end. And the question today is, which area of your organization needs more EDI support? We've broken it down into 5 areas. So first of all, the hiring process. I think we all know, and we're going to go into this in more detail, but we all know that who you attract is key, right? Because if we don't have the right people coming in, we're never going to be able to create the diversity. But once we bring them, we also need to look at engagement. So the second choice is engagement and retention, employee engagement and retention. The third choice, obviously, the leadership have to be aligned and authentic in their drivers for having a diverse workforce. And then we have a lot of not-for-profit clients in the world, in our world today. And so governance is a big topic as well. Making sure trustees have a diverse background, so again, they can represent the world that they're supporting. And Joyce, obviously with a financial background, you mentioned finances as well. Tell me what you do.
I mean, you mentioned innovation. What happens is when you have a diverse workforce, the way you understand what the customer needs or your clients or beneficiaries, if you're a charity, is very different from when you have a monolithic experience internally, where you have so many blind spots and you don't capture everything that the customer needs. So if we take organizations like Amazon, for example, where their battle cry is you are customer centric, when they say they're customer centric, they're thinking of all the different customers and how they can make their lives as easy as possible. And the way to do that is actually to have people who represent your clientele. And then in that way, you can innovate in a better way. If you have people who are disabled within your organization, or people who are from different racial backgrounds, they will tell you, for example, that, in my culture, our people do certain things this way. And so you feed that into your procedures and processes, and then you deliver your products and services in a way that is really going to give you a competitive advantage against your competitors. And I think in charities, it's a similar thing. If you want to change the world for the better, and you want to effect change with the marginalized communities, for example, or communities which are excluded because they're disabled. So when you have people who are disabled, it's not because they have a disability, they're disabled by society because of the way the infrastructure is built. Thinking of a person who is, white, male, non-disabled, non-immigrant, there's a lot of all that, which means it's very, very narrow. So the more you have people in your workforce who are bringing thoughts, reminding the organization or the charity to look at the whole spectrum of people, and particularly people who are affected most by the way the world is today, you can effect change for the better in a much more impactful way.
Indeed, and that takes money, and so finances are very key to any strategy or plan that we implement in our organization. So whatever you're thinking about taking away today, also think about the financial requirement, and there are grants for this. Joyce, you told me when you were working in Sign Health, was it? About the accessibility grants that are available. And I, having worked in business for 20 odd years at that point, was so surprised by some of the financial support that organizations and individuals get to be able to create and have a successful, diverse workforce. So you're not alone that way.
Absolutely. And it's about also education. Education meaning not the formal education you get from university, informal education. Sign Health was a deaf-led charity I worked for, and 80% of people there are deaf or hard of hearing. And what I found, what is interesting, the statistic is that in the UK, we have about 1 in 6 people who are hard of hearing or deaf. 90% of children who are deaf are born to hearing parents, right? So when you see deaf people and you're thinking these are sort of nothing to do with me, actually they have a huge group of stakeholders who are actually within the hearing community. And when you speak to them, their experiences about access to work, these are all things which have been put in place by the government to help people who have got they're hard of hearing or deaf. And they have similar things for people who have got sight challenges and even physical challenges. But if you're not associating with these people and educating yourself, you wouldn't know.
Exactly. And even also, neurodiversity as well.
Yes, as well.
For people with neurodiverse traits as well. So there is so much support. And so I think what you said about education and actually exploring and becoming aware, it's all very well saying we want a more diverse workforce, but what are the layers that have to be covered to then have somebody in your organization working happily and successfully and being supported holistically, right? I think that is key.
That is key. I think also, Meeta, you're just saying about education, and so this is a journey. Every organization, every community, and organizations are communities, whether they're for-profit or not for-profit, they are on a spectrum of this journey. You may be completely undiversified at the moment. It doesn't mean your you're committing crime or the mountain is so steep you cannot start climbing, you still can. You can find out information out there. We have Google, thank you to innovation and technology. So we can always start with Googling and finding out what is there that you can start learning. And then once you do that, it's about being open and saying that we haven't done this, but now we are committed to a journey, and then maybe bringing the leadership and the board into the fold,
Yes.
agreeing on what the strategy is, or at least a plan of how you're going to do to make the change. And speak to your workforce. They may not all look the way you think that they are diverse, but in their circles and in their networks, they probably have people who they can speak to and start bringing that knowledge inside.
Absolutely. That's such, I think often leaders sit there and think, where do I start? But actually, the answers are in your business community. They're in your people. Yeah. And it's quite interesting, actually. The poll at the moment, the leading answer for areas of support are in the hiring process. It's quite interesting because when you and I have spoke, our areas that we've said we're going to cover today, first section was all around EDI with race justice at its center. Yes. We then said we would look at where to look for marginalised people. So that goes straight into the hiring, how to interview and take diversity into consideration when going through the hiring process. So again, all around hiring, and then how to celebrate a diverse workforce. And that all comes into employee engagement, which is running second, and leadership training, which is running third. So I think we've got an audience that are very aligned to the sections and the topics we're going to cover today. But Joyce, you so as I said, it's so great to have you in the room today, because your wealth of experience from the organizations you've worked for, from your own work that you've done on understanding and evolving, and where you are today, which is that you're currently working for Global Greengrants Fund. And I wanted to just ask you about, what your journey has been so far and your expertise in this space.
Yeah, thank you for that question. My journey, I think, myself, a person of color who wasn't born in this country, means that I came to the UK in my early 20s with a very different perspective. I grew up in a country where the majority were Black. I saw a whole spectrum. So I'm the poster girl of Black people and African people are not monolithic. We are not just one story. Yeah. So I came with that already, and it sort of filters into my work. But going to the organizations I've worked for Sign Health, as I said, which is a deaf-led organization that really exposed me to disability justice. Yeah. And then at Black Equity Organization, which is very much about race. Yeah. But again, even within Black Equity Organization, where I started working and developing the people strategy, we were looking at the intersection of disability and race, because we know that when there are a group of people who is affected either by not having opportunities or what have you, the people who are at intersection of either gender and race, or gender and disability, or gender or race and age. Yes. Those are the people who are hardest hit. So as an organization, again, we were talking about being innovative, affecting your surpluses or profits. You're also looking at being sustainable. Sustainability as an organization will really, really depend on how diverse and inclusive your talent pool is. So that's my background. And now where I work at Global Greengrants, it's global, it's in the name. Yeah. The organization started 30 years ago in America. They have the UK as the European place, but they live, actually, what they do, they give participatory grants to the global south, or the global majority, as I like to call it. Yeah. And they pride themselves in actually doing the work and being truly global. So, for example, in the US, the chief exec there is Mexican. She's a Mexican feminist who moved from Mexico City to Colorado to lead. Right. And then you have on the panel again, part of including people, if you're attracting people, you want to have an interview panel that has people who are reflecting your candidates.
Absolutely.
You know, when I went for the interview, there was someone on the panel who spoke my mother tongue, Kiswahili.
Yes.
So I was able to speak to them for maybe 5 minutes. It must have been part of the interview process to check that I said I can speak Swahili, so they wanted to see that. But it gives you a sense of comfort. And where I've been asked to be on the panel, either as a trustee or as an external panelist, it's been because we want to present a diverse panel. And this is after, of course, it's after attracting the talent and the interviews and the recruitment process as far as the agencies are concerned. But with a panel, when people are coming in to interview, they can be absolutely tongue-tied if they don't feel like they belong in that space. Yes. So that's some of the things that you need to think about and a little bit about my journey.
Thank you. And I appreciate you opening up and being so frank and, you know, giving us your experience, because some of the positives you spoke about, it just shows how far we are coming. It's not just, you know, in America, they have positive affirmative action. We don't have that in this country. It's illegal. We don't have quotas to fill, but we do have social impact at the heart of what we do. Every organization that we work with want to be not just good in the world, but good for the world, whether they're from the commercial world or the not-for-profit world. I think that's something that, I don't know why, but it seems post-COVID, the language, the behaviours became very much about, you know, holistic impact. You know, yes, profitable, yes, maximising return to beneficiaries, but also what is the footprint we leave? What is the impression and experience we give every stakeholder? And I was just looking at some statistics, and, you know, 2/3 of employees say that when they're looking for a role, they want an organization that has people from all backgrounds. Only 40% of workers believe that their place of work values diversity and inclusion. And I can tell you now that if we did a poll of businesses and not-for-profit organizations, 99.9% would say they have something in place. So there you have the gap between a policy versus a practice. And I think today is so much about the practice, because I think everyone comes with good intentions. And I think that's where leadership is important, because it starts with leadership making time and putting finances behind the practices that are going to bring EDI to the forefront of an organizational experience from their stakeholders.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think in terms of that, yes, it's finances as well, but also it's about creativity, which comes from, again, diversity of thought. You know, so for example, you may have, I mentioned before, you may have an organization that's not very diverse, but speak to your employees. They will have people in their networks, whether it's friends or acquaintances or people they went to school with, and put in place as part of your recruitment process and policy that you will incentivize your people. If they bring someone who's going to come and join the organization and stay, it is actually, it's a win-win situation where the employee wins, the organization wins, and then the community outside the organization wins as well. So you can do that. Another way of attracting the marginalized groups or people you want in terms of diversifying is looking for organizations such as yours, or, you know, others out there who are specifically looking at marginalized communities. We have organizations which are really focusing on race. There are organizations which are recruiting and focusing on disability. There are also spaces and places where you can meet people in fora where people are talking about different diverse groups which you can reach. I don't believe there is anything such as hard to reach groups. I think if you have the intention and you're putting yourself out there with the humility that you need help, people will come to you. So the 40% of people who are saying, well, there's no, you know, diversity, if they see an organization that is looking for talent and they are willing to say, we are not diverse, We're looking for people to come in here, and we will work with you to make sure that you stay with us. You don't come. That's another thing about retention. Hiring is all one way, and you can have the data to say we've hired X number of people, but retention is another thing.
Absolutely, and we're going to go into that. So I wanted to just cover off a few areas that I would give for what we do as an organisation on our attraction side when we are talking to organisations about, how to be more diverse. So you're right, we do it for our clients, but we also train and teach and consult and audit for organisations to be able to create their own processes as well. But first and foremost, and probably the longest standing, as you said, word of mouth. If you've got people from a marginalised community, they will know people from marginalised communities. So let's put employee referral programs in, right? Let's give referral fees to candidates and ensure that way the referral program promotes inclusivity. So it's a bit like compound interest when you get diversity into your organization. If we're talking finances and accounting,
I love that. Yeah.
The more you have, the more work they will do. So percentage-wise, the impact of an organization will just improve exponentially. I think job boards have been there forever, and it's really key that you don't just, again, I think what you spoke about being in the process, but also determination and consistency. Nothing happens by one effort. You have to consistently have a presence. You have to have conversations. Sometimes if English is a person's second language, if there's an accent challenge, make sure that we need bias training, right? Unconscious bias training, because anybody in a hiring process must be able to check in with their unconscious bias. That isn't something we develop, it's inherent. But if we can be aware of it, then we can counter it. Would you agree with that, Joyce?
Yeah. It could be inherent, but also it can be trained. Because you see children, I mean, I'm a mother myself, and I see how children, they're amazing teachers, children. You see how inclusive they are. Yeah. They haven't had any training. They're just inclusive because they understand the human experience. They don't. They see color and they see disability. However, they're curious. They're very curious about why people are different, and then they include that difference.
Yeah.
It's not something to be feared. And I think as we grow up and we sort of, that gets trained out of us, and then we need to be retrained.
So true.
So yeah, I think it's nature and nurture.
Yeah. When I talk about inherent, I actually mean it's more from the upbringing that we have. But you're so right that children are blank canvases and completely non-judgmental. So somewhere between that and being at work, we have been bombarded. Yeah. And we have to make sure that and I think that's what's really positive about this next generation, is that they are so aware of that they avoid it, So there are great job boards such as Women in Tech, disability jobs, race at work, or engage with an organization like ourselves where we can make sure that we are really channeling and capturing a diverse workforce. I think also networking, like, you said, Joyce, when you have people who know people, join community events that promote diversity. Different industries have different diverse networks within them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And create some partnerships, with underrepresented groups. Give them voices in your organization. Let them, this is part of the retention as well. Let them come and talk about what it means to be, born in, like myself, born in another country, different languages, different sex, gender, religion, all of these things. Like, let's bring it to life and not make it a difference, but actually something we celebrate, that we're so enriched with so much diversity and uniqueness,
Yeah, you've said something about networking and different organizations in different sectors having diverse workforce. I think when we're talking about bias, there is something about looking through CVs and saying, oh, this person doesn't have relevant experience because they don't have the experience within my sector.
Yeah.
or they don't have the right qualifications. Qualifications in things like degrees and things, they are great and they can be requirements for jobs, but sometimes they're not needed.
Yeah.
So it's about just checking that bias,
Yeah.
which sometimes can come through the education system we've been through,
Yeah.
or as you said, upbringing or otherwise backgrounds. And also to encourage, for me particularly, and when I've worked for organizations such as BEO, even Global Green Grants, we are very, very pro bringing in new blood. We call it new blood. People who have never worked for a philanthropic organization. I didn't work for a philanthropic organization before Global Green Grants. I've never worked for a funder, but because we are so open in the way we are global in the way we think, people who have never been in one industry can bring something that is called transferable skills. So be curious and look for those transferable skills so you don't lose out on talent that could bring a perspective that's needed.
Absolutely. And what's really positive to see you speak about education is that a lot of the biggest firms in the city are no longer requiring the highest level of degree, because some children, it's one of our pillars of purpose at the main group this year, is to ensure that more people without private education that come from state backgrounds are given opportunities for roles. People that haven't necessarily gone to a Russell group, but, look at the individual, don't look at the titles. The titles is an indication of the story, but it's not the person and their ability. So I completely agree, because a lot of people, they come from difficult backgrounds or, marginalized societies where they haven't got an environment conducive to educational success. Doesn't mean they're not capable. So I wholeheartedly agree that. And actually, you know what, Joyce, we talk about all the challenges of social media. I think one of the most positives is that it opens every organization up to a full diverse background, great referral process, great hashtags to reach a wider audience. You can create groups online. But social media, if you share your jobs and put them into diverse groups, LinkedIn is great for that. You'll start to really, engender a broad spectrum of responses to the roles that you're advertising. So I think
I agree.
That's a win. That's a win from the
absolutely.
And then the old school career fairs. Universities, again, so positive, because universities have really embraced having diverse student body. And really, if you want to make sure that we retain that diversity in an organization, get seen in front of in career fairs, have conversations, put yourself out there, because you'll attract those candidates from different backgrounds. So
I agree with everything you've said, absolutely. There's one thing that's popped into my head when you spoke about social media, but just general recruitment drives. Do ask what assistance or anything that the candidates need for accessibility. So whether they will need maybe an interpreter, as you say, there could be accent challenges or even language challenges. BSL, British Sign Language, is a language in its own right. You may have an amazing candidate, but they are hard of hearing and they use BSL as their language. So, or Braille, just be open to what they need to be able to work with you, because again, organizations are very worried about the financial cost of including everybody, but this is it. You have access to work. There's a lot of grants. There's a lot of money out there within the government that is there for organizations that are being inclusive.
And I think you were giving me some numbers that it was around sort of £40,000 to £50,000 per person.
It's about 48 grand a year.
Yeah. So that, an organization should be able to do a lot with that, So I just think it's just a real positive to understand that actually finances isn't going to be the stumbling block, that there is a lot of support, but get to know about it, get to know what's out there. And where would you tell people to go to look for this information, Joyce?
So access to work. For example, just go to .gov.uk, and look for access to work, and if you Google in disability finance, you'll find out either there will be links there and telephone numbers where you can call and find out that information.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
There. I think we should share a link somewhere with the.
Yeah, well, let's do this. When we send out the recording later today, we will attach the link to that. I'll make a note of that, and we'll make sure we attach the link for everyone. That's a very good point. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we've touched quite a bit on where to look for marginalised people, and you spoke about your experience of having a diverse interview panel. I'd love to talk a little bit more about how to interview and to take diversity into consideration during the hiring process. We spoke about language and inclusive language. Job descriptions are really important, aren't they? Like when you think about, it's not just race, but neurodiversity, thinking about people with dyslexia who can't actually process a lot of detail very quickly, or again, accessibility, sign support, support for deaf people. Like there's so many ways that organizations can really think about how they're engaging. It's all very well saying you want diversity in your candidate response and therefore to come into your world, but then how do you create an environment through that process to support, because that's where they're making their impression of you as an organization, right? So
absolutely. So it's all about language, but for me, language is not just about words. It's about images as well. So, for example, if you're someone who is disabled or of a different race, non-Caucasian, you want to see in the advert, maybe there's an image of someone who looks like you. That makes you think, okay, this organization, I have a place there. There is sound. Yeah. And I think organizations now, either they themselves, every organization has a website, use videos, create short videos. At Signhealth, we were very, very good doing that, and it's still going on, where the chief exec will do a short video to say, this is who we are. We are looking for someone to do X, Y, and Z. Not a very long video to say what is needed, not necessarily the requirements. If they say you don't need to have a degree, or we have training, or we have a long sort of induction process, you can say all of that in a way that is very inclusive. So you can have, your advert shouldn't be just words. It shouldn't be just a job description. It can be a job description using video. It could be something that can be listened to, like an audio file. So you capture everybody.
Brilliant.
And of course, images as well, in terms of brochures and what people see. If it represents them, they'll probably apply for the job.
Yeah, I love that. So true. And again, we spoke about the fact that there's a gap between policy and practice. I think that the online presence, your shop window, as I call it, is a huge opportunity to demonstrate that diversity. So powerful. And I think having inclusive job descriptions with inclusive language, highlighting your commitment as an organization to your diversity and equal opportunities, and actually, having a diverse interview panel where, we often sit in on panel interviews. I obviously am at an intersection of Asian and female. And I think for organizations where they may not have that diversity, utilize the support of your advisors, your consultants, your board, your trustees, or your partners, your recruitment partners. We are not just here to provide people, we're here to help you give a really positive interview experience as well, because people start to make choices. That first impression thing really is key, but it's also consistency, seeing what you say and do in your first stage is repeated and embraced and enhanced and continued throughout every layer.
Throughout the employee life cycle, I would call it that. So from talent attraction to alumni, if that's what you want to. For me, I think it's so important, again, in terms of the network, to have people who have come to work for the main group. If they leave, they haven't left the community.
No.
They're still part of the organization. So at
Yeah.
GGF, we have that. As a result, we have the network is not just people who are actually in a job in the organization, it's the people who have left also, because we still have tentacles out there in the world globally, where we can still look for candidates, or indeed people go to another organization, get new perspectives and new experiences, which they can then bring back into the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think having that in mind when you're preparing your people strategy or HR strategy is really important, because I think it informs the way you behave and the even the language you use in terms of images and words as well.
Yeah, no, fully agree with that. I think some of the other areas that I would consider in the hiring process is having consistent questions across every candidate. So you have one set of questions. I think that having flexible interview formats, because again, you know, depending on the diverse characteristic, different individuals may require different structures. So really think about that and don't see it as a negative if you're having to think about how to structure an interview process, but keep flexible on the process, on the formats, but keep consistent on the questions. So there is no bias coming into the process. Think about the tools you use for assessment. Are they diverse? Are they accessible to all? Think about the metrics you measure. What's on your scorecard? You know, are you eliminating people if you know something on the scorecard is immediately, you know, unattainable? And yeah, the diversity. I think diversity training on our training side, EDI training is one of the biggest and most impactful bits of work we do, because it's for the people, by the people, and the ideas, the intentions, the drivers, it all comes, you know, from every layer of the organization. And you have senior leadership in there right through to new recruits. And as you said, new recruits come with a whole set of skills and knowledge from other environments. How are they going to engage and foster, you know, innovation? So really just always having a circle of communication and feedback, and make that an ever increasing circle of success in the diversity and inclusivity space.
No, I agree. You've spoken about consistency of the recruitment process. I have noticed that recently people are asking for interview questions in advance. Now, this was always very, very like, oh my God, so this is a bit like cheating. But actually, if one candidate, so in my previous role at Sign Health particularly, and I think at BO, people ask for questions in advance. If one candidate asks for questions in advance, share them with all candidates, because again, that means you're taking care of the neurodivergent people, people who are not able to think on their feet very quickly. And so some of them, it's not just, they're just introverted people. They take the time to think. And if you want your interview process to take an hour, then you're not going into 2 hours because someone takes time to think. And then you have to cut short the interview, you don't get everything they want to tell you. Then share the questions, and then when they come in, you can still measure them, but on an equal plane. They've all had time to consider. Then it's not about the length of their answer, it's about the depth and quality of what they're saying.
Absolutely, that's such a good point. Obviously, blind CVs are important as well. I know that's sort of the basics, but it's important for, you know, we don't put date of birth anyway, don't put names, put numbers, obviously no photos, you know, all of that, you know, make sure that you've thought about every layer. And what I love about when we talk to our clients about, you know, embracing and enhancing the diversity in an interview process is that it doesn't cost any money. It requires, you know, what we talked about is intention and then consistent delivering of what you've agreed to do. And it doesn't have to be world changing. You can just put one or two things in to start with. Don't feel like you've got to reinvent the wheel. Just start with one thing. Maybe start with a diverse interview panel and start with consistent questions. You know, start with that and then build on that as you see the impact of that. So don't feel like it's a mountain. You've just got to take that first step, and you're on the journey to
it's a journey. It's a journey. And I think, you can be amazed by you change one thing and you see a difference. At PO, we had a candidate pack which had a Black woman on it because it's a Black-led organization. And every single time we would get huge amounts of women applying for that job. And I said, we should change the image.
Yeah.
So we changed the image to male, and we started getting men applying.
There you go. Representation.
One thing, representation matters, and that is about just being inclusive.
Yes.
It's really, we are lucky in the UK. I think that we don't have affirmative action as something that you have to do to fill in quotas. So it's just about having that mindset change, having that intention, like you say, intention and thinking, actually, this just makes logical sense.
Yeah.
It's ethical, it means we are more sustainable, and it's actually fun. Because it's almost like a social experiment. You do this, you change image, you change words, you attract different kind of people.
Yeah.
That means you're just diversifying your pool like that. Absolutely. In an evolving way.
And we know that it always hits the bottom line. The beneficiaries get more. If it's commercial, there's more profits. You're future-proofing,
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's one of the luckiest things we have being in UK and especially London is we have such great access to a diverse workforce. But don't take it for granted. Do the work and be deliberate in it, agree what good looks like and agree what, for 2024, going to break it down into 12 months and we're going to make a change every quarter or evolve every quarter, something like that. And you can lay that out, so it doesn't need to be time consuming, but it can have really strong impact if you do one or two things really well and do them consistently, and everyone does it. So, I think that really comes into celebrating a diverse workforce and retaining that workforce, because the poll is currently running at 50% for the hiring process, but 25% for retention and 25% for leadership. So I think what's really important in celebrating is having leadership commitment, leadership communicating their dedication to EDI, race justice, supporting neurodiversity, whatever your focus is, making sure they set the tone for the whole organization. It's got to start there.
It's got to start there. And Meeta, in terms of celebrating, again, it's little and often. I have a saying that if you want to make change, and let's use analogy of rain, torrential rain is a lot of it, but sometimes it can cause floods and it doesn't go into the ground. It's a drizzle. So it's little and often. Celebrating a diverse workforce doesn't need to be a huge party every year.
No.
It's about honoring, if they're Islam and they have religious celebration, it's about honoring those, giving them the time to do it, announcing that to the rest of the team, and for the same to the employees, so they can tell everybody about their celebration, or whether it's Diwali or it's a Christian. There are people who are atheists, they don't even know anything about Christianity, although it's become part of secular culture. Sure. Give them a day or just, half an hour to talk about what it means to them, and that everybody is invited to it. It's about that. It's about having really good policies around whether it's home working or how you look after your employees who are parents. It's about, like, in some organizations where they say we have a day where you can bring in your dog, Have a day during summer where people can bring in their children. It's about diversity. Have a day when someone who is on the spectrum, maybe they've got dyslexia, they just talk to their colleagues about how they cope and what works for them.
Understanding what their behaviours are relating to the neurodiversity versus personality.
Right.
Give that support and understanding. Yes, so true.
And it can be within one-to-ones with their manager, but that's within a loop, right? When it's like, this is how I process information because I'm dyslexic, and to everybody, and to allow people to ask questions. It's got a lot more traction, actually, if it's done little and often. And then, of course, you can do a gathering where everybody's being celebrated, but I think it's the little and often that's really, really impactful. And that's where the change happens big. And I think even when you were talking about London being diverse naturally, London is part of the UK. So since we went into lockdown, a lot of organizations are working either hybrid or working from home completely. Open your recruitment drives to everybody in the UK, so that you have people in Sheffield where they live in a small village and they've never seen a person of color before work for the organization, which means they're now exposed to a diverse workforce in a diverse part of the world.
Yeah.
So I think that's it in terms of celebration. It's not either or. I think it's all of those. But I think little and often, isn't it? Works really well, little and often.
Yeah. And you can create, you have mental health first aiders. You have, I've very much suggested having a menopause support leader. You can have a diversity leader. It doesn't have to be an HR role. It can be a community role. People would love to be sort of able to stand up and drive that forward in the organization. So, they can hold the post for 3 months, it doesn't have to be an annual forever thing. But I just think, bringing some committees together and celebrating each other's differences is what then allows you to see that the differences do not make you different as individuals. You actually have so much in common, so many shared values, beliefs, behaviors, and drivers that make you all want to be part of this organization that celebrates you all,
And at the risk, I agree with that. I think at the risk of sounding utilitarian, think of your workforce as a toolbox. So the more diverse, the more you can't really fail to resolve any problem, because there'll be someone who has an idea or has seen this before or can think really quickly about what can be done. So,
Well, that was a very powerful closing statement there, Joyce. I've just seen the time. We're over 45 minutes. We've had a really good, strong turnout today, and everyone stayed for the whole session. So thank you, everyone who's given their time and commitment and their thoughts on the poll, which I'll run through very quickly in a minute. But Joyce, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure and so insightful, and we're always learning. So well done to everyone who's made their first main event webinar one of such high importance and positive impact in your world.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to show everyone the results of our poll, and hiring turned out to be 50% of the vote, employee engagement 25%, and leadership training 25%. So we can definitely look. Joyce and I are both available on LinkedIn. You get our contact details in the follow-up. And I'm getting a bit of feedback, so I apologise for the sound. But we look forward to hearing about how you've been able to take from today and start applying that in your organisation for creating and celebrating a truly diverse and successful workforce. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again, Joyce. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. Lovely conversation. Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care.